There's nothing worse than picking up your saw and finding a big puddle of bar oil underneath it. So in this video, we're going to show you the two most common fixes for these bar oil leaks. The first one is actually replacing the oil cap. For some reason, these OEM steel caps tend to leak. Here I bought some replacements from Hypa off of Amazon, and believe it or not, they actually tend to seal better. I'm demonstrating on a MS362, but this should apply for pretty much all Stihl chainsaws with slight variances. To remove that cap, all we have to do is open it up and we can see the string there. We grab it with the pliers and push it down out of that retainer. Now we've got the new cap. We just put the string down in there, grab it with the pliers and pull that plastic end piece up in that retainer. It takes a little bit to get that plastic piece lined up correctly, but once you have it, you can pull on that cap, pull it up into place. Pretty easy process. Now you can go ahead and reinstall the cap. Now the one thing you'll notice the first couple times you reinstall this, it is a much tighter fit than the stock cap. I believe that's the reason why this seals better.
If that didn't work, likely what you have to do is replace the rubber pickup tube on the oil pump. Unfortunately, this is a bit more complicated than replacing the cap, but I'm going to walk you through it.
The oil pump is behind the clutch assembly on the chain side of the saw. So we need to start by removing the chain and bar assembly. One tool to rule them all. Once the bar assembly is out of the way, we can see the clutch assembly and the drive sprocket exposed. First thing we need to do to take this off is remove this E-clip. A small flat-headed screwdriver will do the trick here to pry it out of place. All of this is mounted on the engine's crankshaft. That's where it gets its power delivery from. You can see the gray part shaft in the center there is the crankshaft. So once we have that E-clip removed, we can take off the outer washer and then the drive sprocket. If you have a residential saw, which basically is a lower cost saw, that drive sprocket is not going to be replaceable like that. It will be integral to the clutch drum assembly. So what you're seeing left there with the fingers on it where the drive sprocket slid on, basically that will be your drive sprocket. So if you have a worn drive sprocket and you need to replace it, you need to replace the entire clutch drum. Not a big deal. They're available from Stihl directly or on the aftermarket Amazon. It's a really good source for all of those components. During disassembly of this saw, I found another pleasant surprise here. You can see I'm popping out rollers from the needle bearing on the inside of the clutch drum, and the rollers are in good condition. The shaft looks like it's in good condition. So what happened here is the cage. So this needle bearing has a plastic cage that looks like it's melted and the rollers have become free. The clutch drum should slide off pretty easily. In this case, it's not, reinforcing that overheating theory. So I had to put a vice grip on there and wiggle it free. And once we get it off here, you'll see the outside of the drum is discolored, further proving that theory of overheating. The drum itself is warped. That's why it didn't want to come off very easily. So obviously this is another component we'll have to replace during reassembly. Now our clutch assembly is exposed with a hex built right into it. Our Stihl tool does fit this, but you don't have much leverage with the tool. The other thing is you can see it's just spinning on me. So we need to lock this up so we can loosen the clutch assembly. The best way to do this is to remove your spark plug and then put something soft inside the combustion chamber to prevent the piston from moving. So here again, you can use your Stihl tool, take your top off, remove your spark plug. Pretty easy process. As saw owners, we should all be used to doing this. What I like to use for this is some small diameter soft nylon rope. Now that the spark plug's out of the spark plug hole, you can feed the rope in there until you fill up the combustion chamber. You do want the piston slightly down from top dead center just to make some room for the rope to enter in there. Once the combustion chamber or cylinder won't take any more rope, you can just leave the rest hanging out of the spark plug hole. We obviously need something to grab on to remove it when we're done. Now that we've got the rope fed in there, we can get our breaker bar and our socket on the clutch assembly to remove it. This clutch assembly is a left-hand thread, so it is the opposite of most fasteners that are right-hand thread. So to loosen it, we're actually going to have to spin it clockwise. And even with the clutch hub being warped from heat, the clutch assembly looks to be in good condition and it can be reused. One more washer to remove, and then we can finally see our oil pump behind everything. At the center is a plastic gear with an arm on it that engages with the hub. That's what drives the oil pump. It looks like the heat did not transfer to this part and do any damage to it, so it can be reused. Here I'm showing the notch in the hub assembly where that arm fits in. We got to keep that in mind for reassembly to make sure it's lined up properly. You need a T25 Torx bit to remove the two socket head cap screws holding the oil pump in place. Once those are removed, you can simply slide it off. Now we can finally see the pickup hose that we are after. You can use a small flat-bladed screwdriver to push it into the oil reservoir to remove it. And if there's any oil in that reservoir, it's going to come leaking out, so you should drain it before doing this. Now you can flip the saw over, open up the oil reservoir, and fish the tube assembly out with a pair of long needle nose pliers. The pickup very rarely needs to be replaced, so I'm going to reuse it. It looks to be in good shape. So I just have to pry it off of the old tube and then install it on the new pickup tube. I picked up a package of these oil pickup tubes on Amazon from Hypa. I'll leave the link in the video description below, but you can see the difference between the original in the diameter of the tube is significantly greater on this aftermarket part. This should only improve the availability of the oil on the supply side of the pump, improving oiling performance. Now, installation of the oil tube, you can drop it into the oil reservoir from the cap side and then fish it out back through the hole. I found it easier to go back on the clutch side, and it's a bit of a tight fit to get the pickup through the supply hole, but it can be done. Just be gentle, otherwise you can break that assembly, and then slide the pickup tube down into place. Once the pickup tube assembly is in place, you need to finish seating it in the through hole of the case. This can be done with a small flat-bladed screwdriver with no sharp edges, with special care not to rip the rubber. The red arrow is indicating the flange that needs to be pushed through the hole. The green arrow is pointing to a tab on the pickup tube that has two functions. One, to make sure you've got it in the correct orientation, and this orientation is as shown here with that tab pointing towards the top of the saw. The other function it serves is something to grab onto if you decide to install it from the oil reservoir side. So you can choose to drop the pickup tube assembly into the fill hole of the oil reservoir and use this tab to pull it through the hole and seat it in that orientation. The reason these pickup tubes start to leak is because this side that's exposed to the clutch side of the saw tends to get hard and brittle over time. The OEM rubber does not seem to hold up very well, which is not really typical of Stihl. Normally they make a pretty reliable product, but for some reason these pickup tubes seem to fail at a high rate. And this cone assembly on the oil pump is what slides inside that rubber, and if it becomes hard and brittle, it no longer seals well against this cone assembly and can easily leak. Hopefully this aftermarket tube lasts longer. Now that that's in place, we can reinstall the oil pump. Again, special attention should be taken on these socket heads cap screws. that retain the oil pump, do not over tighten these. They will break off quite easily. After the oil pump's in place, we can slide in our oil drive gear, then the large back washer. Then we can reinstall the clutch assembly. Remember, this is left-hand thread, otherwise referred to as reverse thread, so we have to go counterclockwise to tighten it up. You should still have your rope assembly in the combustion chamber or the cylinder, so we can tighten this up. Now that the clutch is tightened up, you can remove the rope from the cylinder. One thing to note is you should not use a frayed rope that could get caught between the cylinder and the piston. You can pull, and once that is removed, you can pull the engine over a little bit, make sure it's free, and then reinstall the spark plug.
If this video is helping you out, please consider subscribing to this channel. It's the best way to support me in the creation of these videos.
Now we need our new parts to continue. The first part is our needle bearing. This one I picked up at a Stihl dealer, and they assured me it was the right one, even though I said, the OD looks a little small. So I paid $12 for that, and sure enough, it was the wrong one. So I ordered this clutch drum kit off of Amazon. It came with the needle bearing, a new washer, a new E-clip, plus the clutch drum for less than $10. Yes, it's from China, but the quality of parts actually look decent, and they're the right ones. So who would have thought I can get the right parts on Amazon, and going to a Stihl dealer, I got the wrong part. Now it's a matter of putting these components back on. Before putting the needle bearing in place, you want to put some high temperature grease on it. There is no oil or grease that gets to it normally. Now it's time to put the clutch drum back on. Remember our notch in it that engages with the oil pump drive. You can see the oil pump drive just behind the clutch assembly here. I'm poking it with the small screwdriver. So you need to line that notch up with that piece. And it's hard to see both at the same time with good lighting. You can do it. But also, once you slide the clutch drum on, you won't see it fully unless it engages into that notch. So if you wiggle it around a little bit, you'll notice here I took it off just to make sure that indeed the oil pump drive moved with the clutch drum. And you can put it back in place. And your needle bearing might pop out like that, but you can just put it back into place. And because this is the Pro Cell, we've got the separate drive sprocket we need to install. Then our washer, finished by our E-clip. You can start the E-clip with your fingers and then finish it off with the pliers. It'll snap into place. Now all there is left to do is reinstall your chain and bar assembly and put your top cover on. After this fix, hopefully you will have years of leak-free performance on your Stihl chainsaw. And if it starts to leak again, you know exactly what you have to do to fix it. Thanks for watching. Adios.